Hi, this is Damon Pistolka, host of The Faces of Business, where I talk with interesting people, sharing life and business experiences to entertain, engage, build community, and provide information to help others succeed. If you're interested in learning more about one of our guests or how we are helping business owners generate wealth and build businesses they can sell or succeed at Exit Your Way, you can find more information on our website, exityourway.com, or by contacting me directly, Damon at exityourway.com. I hope you enjoy the show. All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I'm your host, Damon Pistolka, and I am excited for our guest today. I've got David Stone here, and we're going to be talking about conquering I just looked at it, conquering self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And we're going to be talking about David and his book, I Fearless. Man, let's get into it, David. Glad to have you here.
Thanks, Damon. I am thrilled to be here and thrilled to share this stuff with your listeners and your viewers, because self-doubt, imposter syndrome, anxiety, my gosh, it's just, we've had it up to here with epidemics, but that certainly is one of them.
Yes. And I tell you, when we connected on this, I was and got your books, looking at them and going through them and stuff. I mean, I'm really inspired by your story, and let's kind of start there, because you started in one of your latest books here, the Fearless Decision. You talked about actually living in your car and being a successful international marketing consulting, living in your car. Let's start and talk about your background and just what got you here.
That's not something you hear every day, is somebody.
Yeah.
Like that. But no, absolutely. That's exactly what happened to me. And not only was that, but I was 55 years old and had been, had a career for many decades and a successful career. But here's the really interesting thing, is that anxiety and self-doubt and imposter syndrome, they're sort of, I like to call it an invisible curse. On the outside, you look great. Everything, you got your act together, everything's going just fine. And yet on the inside, it's just a mess. Now, nobody can see that from the outside, but on the inside, you're a mess. And you think, I don't belong here. How did they let me in?
Yeah.
When are they going to find out? And the thing about thoughts is, and we've heard this so many times, but ultimately they create your reality, because the things that you think about are the things that you focus on and the things that you draw to you. And one of my go-to anxieties, if you want, was always money. And I grew up as a kid, had a wonderful upbringing as a kid. I was one of five. And so we had a big family, had a wonderful upbringing. The only thing that wasn't there was money. And so I spent my childhood watching my mom and dad once a month sit around the kitchen table and worrying, oh, how are we going to make this? And all those all over the table and the looks on their faces, and who are we going to rob this month to pay them, and on and on and on. And so I grew up with these thoughts being put in my head, and I'm not blaming them or anything. They were doing what they had to do. But I grew up being indoctrinated with this idea that money doesn't grow on trees. The only way you can be rich is to be lucky or crooked. Those are the two routes to getting to being wealthy. And so I carried that into my adulthood, and you just sort of believe these things, and sooner or later it catches up with you. And so when you have these beliefs in yourself, self-limiting beliefs, what happens, and they're below your level of consciousness, because I was out there, I was making six figures as a marketing consultant. I'm traveling all over the country and around the world. And yet there's this thing going on inside my head that's saying you don't belong here. And so you start to self-sabotage. And it doesn't matter how much money you make. All you have to do is spend that much more, and there isn't enough. And so here I was, and this was 2009, summer. Fortunately, it was summertime. And all of a sudden, I had a house foreclosed on me. I was trying to juggle a couple of houses at the same time. I had some anyway, I won't get into all the details, but suddenly here I am, literally living in my car, and not living in my car as in the Hertz guy, that, the road warrior who keeps Hertz in business. I was literally, I pull into the rest stop. It was a truck stop at night, and remember it very clearly, in South Carolina. And I pull in to get all comfy, pull the pillow out of my back seat, lay the seat back, wrap my leg around the gear shift, and go off to sleep. And the next morning I'd wake up, and I would drive. The public library was a great office because they had Wi-Fi, and I was still serving my clients. Clients didn't know a thing about this, but there it's going. Anyway, so, I find myself in this situation. And of course, the first thing you want to do, your first instinct is, who do I blame for this? Whose fault is this? It must be the government's fault, must be the economy's fault, must be, my client's fault. That's it. It's my accounts receivable. They won't pay me those, whatever. And anyway, so you look around trying to find somebody to blame. But then when you think about it long enough, you realize, or I realized at least, that for all the events that led up to this, everything that happened that led up to this, there had been one and only one person consistently present for everything that happened. Yeah. And it was the guy in the mirror. And so I sort of went, oh, well, just a minute. And anyway, I remember very clearly that morning I'd woken up early, and it was a beautiful morning, sun coming up through the pine trees. And I sort of looked in the rear view mirror, because that was my vanity mirror to brush my hair with. And I said, okay, wow, maybe it is me. And then it sort of hit me. And I said to nobody in particular, but anybody who might have been listening, I said, okay, my way has not worked. This is what my way has gotten me. There's got to be a better way, and I'm wide open to it. And what was really interesting, because as soon as you open yourself to solutions, because we try to muscle through everything. No, I can do this. I'm tough. I'm resilient. But as soon as you open yourself to solutions, it was very interesting. That very day, I drove to the public library where I would work. And about mid-morning, I get up. I'm sitting at one of those little tables. I get up, I have to go to use the men's room. And I'm walking through the stacks where all the books are. And this book had fallen off and was lying on the ground. So I guess I'd bumped it or whatever. And I'm a neat guy. I bent down to pick it up, and I looked. And it was a book by the late, great Wayne Dyer, who was a wonderful self-help person. And I started flipping through the pages, and I said, okay, somebody's listening here. And that was the first of literally hundreds of books that I have read, courses I've taken, studying that I have done, because what I realized is what was to blame was inside here, in my head, and the thoughts that I've been having, and the self-limiting beliefs that I was going. So I said, all right, I am going to learn everything that I can possibly learn about how I got here, what was going on in my head. And I knew it had nothing to do with the economy, because all these other people around me are doing great, and I had lots of clients and everything else. So I said, all right, it's in here somewhere. What can we find? And I spent quite a while. Fortunately, the living in my car part only lasted about a month or so. But the study part, still going to this very day. But it took me a couple of years, but I learned so much about it. And what I learned allowed me to get rid of anxiety, get rid of fear, get rid of self-doubt, get rid of imposter syndrome. And I can safely say today that there is nothing that goes on out there that knocks me loose, or gets me frightened, or gets me anxious, or whatever. I have challenges just like anybody else. Yeah. But that's all they are. As I look at them and say, oh, okay, there's an interesting one. What are we going to do about that? But lying awake at night, not anymore.
That's awesome. That's great. And we'll stop just for a moment, because I want to say hello, Ronald Henderson. Thanks for being here today. Ronald's out of the DC area. Great to see you here today. Chris Loken out of Wisconsin. So it's great to see you here today, Chris. Thanks for tuning in, guys. So you I just have to giggle a little bit because
what else can you do?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I giggle a little bit because you talked about open yourself to solutions and how you describe, you walked by and found that Wayne Dyer book lying on the ground and you opened it up. So I have to ask, what was the title of that book?
I'm just looking behind me here, and I mean, this is not a false background. This is where I learned. I think, but I can't remember for certain. But I think it was called The Power of Intention.
The Power of Intention.
Yeah, it's up there somewhere.
Yeah, I just finished that book not too long ago. So
okay. But it just suddenly got me. I thought, okay, well, wow, my thoughts is what's been going on in my head that got me here. And I kept wanting to blame outside circumstances all the time. But the outside circumstances have got nothing to do with it. They are the result of what's going on in my head. There's two interesting things, phenomena that go on. And by the way, what I started to do once I had said, okay, I got to learn about this, I started a really intense study. And what I decided to do, and this is what I do with now with all my students and with my clients and such that I work with, I said, I'm going to take a very objective view to this. I'm going to be like a scientist in a laboratory, and I have this blob of anxiety. I have this blob of self-doubt sitting on my laboratory bench. I'm wearing my white lab coat, and I'm going to study it. I'm going to poke it and measure it and weigh it and probe it and dissect it and learn everything that I can to learn about it in a very detached kind of way. And that was really, really useful because I learned some really amazing things. Number one that I learned is that we, as humans, we are born with two and only two fears. We come pre-programmed, and the two we are born with is number one, loud noises, and number two, falling. After that, every single thing that we, that goes bump in the night or that we lie awake about is learned or conditioned to us.
Yes.
Or we teach ourselves this. And the vast, vast majority of those things are things that are in our heads because, the human body is an amazing miracle thing. And it is designed that if it's threatened in any kind of way, it knows how to respond. So, and this is millions of years old, this biology that we've got. And so, you're a caveman walking along and the saber-toothed tiger jumps out of the bush. And we are pre-programmed with our biology to sense a threat. And the instant we sense a threat, our body takes over and it kicks in. And a couple of really interesting things happen. Number one, we start pumping hormones in, cortisol, adrenaline, some of these other things that prime our body for action. Our heart rate goes up, our breathing rate increases, our muscles get actually stronger, our reflexes speed up. And we are ready to take action, the fight or flight thing that we all know about. And so, the saber-toothed tiger comes away. You either beat him off or you run away. And these days, we don't have any of those. But, you're walking along the street, you step out, you go across the street, and you turn, there's a bus coming. Yeah. And, same response. I bet, something happens. Your body kicks in. You're primed, you jump back onto the sidewalk, the bus goes by. Oh, whew, that was close. But then your body settles down again. The hormones, go out of your system, your heart rate slows back down, everything's cool. But here's where it gets really interesting. Our body is a miracle, but frankly, it's really stupid because your body cannot tell the difference between an oncoming bus and lying awake at night worrying about my finances in retirement.
Yep.
To the body, it's exactly the same. There's a threat. something bad is about to happen to me. So it goes into red alert mode instantly.
Mm-hmm.
Except with a bus, I know what to do. If I'm worried about my friend didn't like my Facebook post, I don't know what to do. And so so many of us remain in this chronic red alert state, and constantly with the adrenaline and constantly with high blood pressure and all that other stuff, but we don't know what to do. So we realize that all of these reactions we're having are all fear-based: anxiety, self-doubt, imposter syndrome. All of these have at their root is fears. I'm afraid something bad is about to happen to me. I may not be able to put my finger on what that is, but something bad is about to happen, and I'm responding this way. Now, when it's a bus, I know what to do. But when that threat is sort of vague or off in the distance somewhere, I don't know what to do. And so I just kind of sit there and vibrate, if you want. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So that's the first thing, is that we have this sort of biological response to threat, and it's built in. Now, a couple of other things that I learned is, we're pre-programmed. We have what's called a negativity bias. And again, this is 1 million years old, because it says, I need, if something bad's going to happen, I need to know about it. And it would be nice if I noticed it before it got me. And that was useful 1 million years ago. Today, the number of things in our life that we encounter that are genuine threats to our well-being is very low. There are no saber-toothed tigers anymore. And we've all been taught to look both ways before we cross the street. But we have all these existential threats, all these vague, far-off threats that we respond in exactly the same way to. So the other thing that happens, just for fun, and again, in my laboratory, as it were, that I learned, is we were trained as children to worry. Your mother, when you were a kid. I love to blame the mothers. It's all, we had Mother's Day the other day. God bless them, but it's so much fun to say, Mom, it's your fault. Why? Because, it was, don't talk to strangers, and, wash your hands. You could get sick, doing that, your hand will fall off, And so we were taught as children that the world around us is a threatening place. And when you're 6 years old and you're walking home from school by yourself, don't talk to strangers is really good advice. But if nobody eventually got around to telling you don't have to be afraid of strangers anymore, and now you're 26 or 46 or 66, and you still have this thing about talking to somebody you've never met, that's not so great anymore. And now it gets in your way. And that self-limiting belief and that imposter syndrome and that self-doubt become obstacles to your career and to your success and to the success of your business and all these other things. So now they're limiting beliefs. Then, and let's just keep piling on top of here, right? Because the world around us is conspiring to make us worried. I mean, you walk through an airport and there's all these video monitors that are blaring CNN or Fox News or whatever. And I love the headlines, breaking news. Here's what you need to know right now. What do I need to know right now? And it turns out what I need to know right now is there's a typhoon on the other side of the planet. Why do I need to know this right now? Well, because the news guys is trying to sell eyeballs on the screen, because they've got advertisers, and the more they can dramatize things, the more I'm going to pay attention. But once again, I'm in this constant state of elevated stress and red alert mode and everything else. So now I look around and the whole world is worried, and I think, oh, wow, worry must be normal. So I feel worried or anxious, and I think, oh, well, there's nothing I can do about it because that's normal. And my response to that is, yeah, it is normal, but it's not biologically normal. It's normal in the same way that potholes in the road are normal, and underfunded schools are normal, and racial profiling is normal. They're normal, but that doesn't mean they're good or required. And anxiety is the same. Yes, it's normal in simply that so many people experience it, but it is not required. That is what I discovered in my study. It is not required.
Not required.
It's not required. It's not necessary. And we can choose to opt out of it.
Yeah.
That's excited.
Well, no doubt, because it is, when you get to the heart of it, the fear, the anxiety, the worry that we induce into ourselves is the vast majority of our anxiety.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. The worry is the worst part. If we ever, and when I work with clients and we start dissecting it, and what we invariably discover when we start, what exactly is it you're worried about? And then, there's this list of things. And then I ask, has any of these things ever come true? And invariably the answer is, well, no. But on the rare occasion, like in my case, my worst fear was being broke and homeless. Well, it came true. Now, I would not want to do it again, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I survived. And in the end, it was one of the better things that happened to me in my life, because it shifted everything and set me off on a new course. And so all that worrying about it, in the end saying, oh, okay, rent cheap. And so the worry is far, far worse than the actual whatever it is you're worried about.
The worry is far worse than what you're worrying about. I like that. Because it is a lot. And then too, I think I read this a while ago. It's, every moment that you spend worrying is a moment you're wasting that you don't have anymore.
Oh yeah. I love
just that.
Yep. That's right. You don't have it. And I mean, there's so many of these sort of wisdoms. There's, the coward dies 1,000 deaths, the hero just one. And then one of my favorites is the acronym for fear, FEAR, which can be fantasized events appearing real.
Yeah.
Fantasized events appearing real, because that's all they are, is fantasized. The only place they exist is here. They're not out there. You've just made it up. And yet we're suffering as if they were real.
Yeah.
So after all this had, when I discovered that so many people have it and they've had it for so long, this is where the secret starts coming out of how to get rid of it. What we discover is that worry and anxiety and self-doubt and imposter syndrome are nothing but mental patterns, thought patterns that have become habitual. And we have repeated these thought patterns so often and for so long that they've simply become habits. And like any habit, they drop below our level of conscious awareness, and we aren't even aware of what's going on. And now habits, there are some really good habits. You walk in at night after, home from work, you drop your keys in the little dish by the front door, and I don't have to think about where my keys are in the morning, because I know they're right there in the little dish. Now, do I remember dropping them in the bowl? No, because it's a habit. I don't have to remember it. That's a useful habit. But as we all know, there are many habits that aren't quite so useful. And this is the question that I ask when I'm working with clients and with students. I ask them, I say, okay, we've been through this phase one. We've studied anxiety and self-doubt and imposter syndrome in the laboratory. We've learned everything there is to know about them. And there's all kinds of exercises that we go through. Now, having discovered that this is nothing except a mental habit, here's the question we ask. Is this habit serving you? Is your life better because this habit is here? Now, that's an honest question, and you can answer it yes or no. Because if you say, actually, yeah, I think my life is better off because I worry regularly or I'm anxious, then my response is, God bless you, carry on and work harder at it. But if you say, actually, no, I can imagine that my life would be better without it, then we move on and say, okay, great, let's carry on. So this method that I worked to put together for myself and kind of perfected on myself is what I teach now. I call it the audacity method. It has 3 parts. And that's the first part, that study it in a laboratory. And I call that pattern interrupt. And psychologists use these terms when we've got mental patterns that are going on. We want to put a stop to them because they're on continuous repeat loop in our
without
heads.
even knowing it.
Without even knowing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, if you ever watch on YouTube, you see those when they set up dominoes, you know, they'll set up like an entire gymnasium full of them. And it's fun to watch. You push the first one and they go and go and go and go for hours. And it's fun to watch. But all you need to do is stick your finger in front of one domino and it all comes to an end. And that's what we call pattern interrupt. And that's what we do when we step away from experiencing the anxiety and the self-doubt personally. Actually, Damon, there's some interesting language. There's a language thing that we use too that really kind of reinforces it. I want you to imagine it's dinner time. You're in the kitchen, you're chopping carrots or something, get ready for dinner, and the knife slips and you cut your finger. Ow! You know, that hurts. But the cut is there on my finger. It's highly localized. The pain is highly localized. And I think, ow, and I decide, no, I don't need stitches. I just go to the bathroom, I get a Band-Aid, wrap it up, and we're good to go. Now, it hurts, but I know that in a couple of days, it'll be fine, and I'll have completely forgotten about it. The language that we use is really important because we say, I have a cut. My finger hurts, my left foot feels just fine. I have a cut right here. When we are talking about anxiety, when we are talking about self-doubt and imposter syndrome, the language changes because we then say, I am anxious. I am an imposter. And that is dramatically different because as soon as those 2 words, I am, are really, really powerful because they describe our identity. That says who you are. I am anxious. I am David. I am 6'1" and I am anxious. End of story. But if I have some worries that I'm dealing with right now, then suddenly it's like a cut and I've distanced myself from it. I have a cut and I think, what would I like to do about this? I have choices. I can go to the hospital and get it stitched up. I can put a Band-Aid on it. I can let it bleed. The choices are mine. When I use that same language, I have some anxiety. Okay, good. What would you like to do about it? You know, would you like to deal with it? Yes, I would, please. Okay, great. Here's some options. But as soon as we say I am, well, that's a whole person experience. And this is why our pattern interrupt section pulls us away from that, steps away in that scientific arm's length kind of way so that we can look back at it and say, okay, I get it. I see what it is. I see how it got here. What would I like to do about it? And that shifts everything because now you are taking control of it instead of it taking control of you. And that makes all the difference.
Yes, it really does. And I just want to step back for a moment. Now, your practice now, I Fearless. I like that one of the things you talk about, I Fearless. You help left-sided brain people. That explain the premise behind that.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about it, and you know, we joke about left brainers and right brainers, and you know, all the engineers with the pocket protectors and all the rest of it. We have some fun with that. But the truth is that everybody is a little bit of each. You know, even the most artistic person in the world has, a left brain. And this is the secret to the audacity method, is employing that left brain logic, the formidable power of left brain logic to step away, analyze it in this arm's length scientific kind of method, and then ask some questions. Because the scientific method is based on objectivity. It says, I'm going to study this thing. I'm not going to have any preconceived notions about this thing that I'm studying, whether it's a bug or a leaf or a tree or a star. I'm going to learn I'm going to observe it. I'm going to learn what
Yeah.
and then I'm going to reach conclusions about it. And that's why we want to leverage this left brain ability to exercise reason and logic. And the other thing we do is use the Socratic method. You remember Socrates back in
Mm-hmm.
ancient Greece. And that whole Socratic method is about asking questions and probing. And we ask questions like, is this serving you? Because it's a legitimate question to ask. And if it is, great. But if it's not, okay, next question, would you like to get rid of it? Yes, I would actually. And that is a very different stance than I am anxious. Oh, I can't sleep now. I'm worried about my health. Now I'm worried about worrying. I love it when we have anxiety squared.
Yes.
But yeah, that's why I say helping left brainers, because it doesn't matter. Everybody can be a left brainer for a little while, and that's all we need.
Yeah, I understand that now, and I really, really appreciate you explaining it, because it is stepping back and looking at that anxiety or what's causing that anxiety from a different perspective, rather than it is us, rather than it's something I'm dealing with, or
exactly,
setting it off on a shelf like it should be, rather than it's part of us. It's just something we're dealing with.
That's exactly right. And that's one of the things, as hopefully we are, approaching the end of COVID. We'll see what happens. But for the last 2 or 3 years, man, it's been, anxiety central around here. And it's, there's been all kinds of advice floating around about how to deal with anxiety. But most of the advice, I dare say all that I've ever seen, if you Google how to treat my anxiety, what it focuses on, and if you how to deal with self-doubt, the advice focuses on dealing with the symptoms of it. And the advice is, do deep breathing, go for a walk in nature, have a nice cup of herbal tea, get a weighted blanket and put that on yourself. Now, in the moment, each of those things is very helpful and makes you feel better, but it doesn't root out the problem, because tomorrow when something comes along that makes me nervous, I'm going to feel exactly the same way again. I much prefer to get at, what is at the root of this to begin with?
Yes.
And let's get rid of that and never have to deal with the problem again.
That is so great, because one of the things that is frustrating for me, I think about, and personally just seeing how anxiety is treated, is they do just treat the symptoms. Treat the symptoms.
Oh, yeah,
Take a pill. Take a pill. You'll knock the symptoms back. You'll knock the symptoms back. You knock the symptoms back. But and we know our minds are much more powerful than that. And now, granted, there's medical conditions that maybe this is something you can't get completely rid yourself of, but your mind can.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think this is a really important point that needs to be stated, Damon, and that is that I get it, that there are genuine mental health issues, and here we are in May, and it's Mental Health Awareness Month. There are people who deal with genuine mental health conditions or genuine physiological conditions that result in anxiety and worry and all those other things. And God bless us that we have the treatments and the medications that are available to help with those. But that is not the vast majority of us are fully capable. But we turn far too easily to say, give me a pill, to the Prozac or whatever it is, Xanax, to calm me down, rather than saying, no, I don't want to put up with this. But it does need to be said that, we're not talking about 100% of the people.
No. And I just think that we're looking for a quick solution in a lot of senses. And that's nice and everything. But what we're talking about here is not a quick solution. It's something that you have to learn and replace habits and do. And yes, it's not going to take you your entire life, but it is effective for a lot of people.
Oh, and I mean, the Audacity Method course that I have it's 13 weeks. and you're done. And if you're not done, you get your money back.
Yeah.
Because that's all it takes. And frankly, I could, if somebody came to me, and first of all, they have to come and say, I really want to get rid of this, because there's another group of people that frankly love their anxiety, because it brings, there's payoffs. There's always a payoff for behavior. People who smoke, they know it's not good for them, but they do it. And if you could really get at it, they'd say, well, because it calms me down, or it makes me fit in socially, whatever it is, there's always a payoff. And there are some people that just, say, well, I like the sympathy. I enjoy the drama, whatever. Again, if you want to keep it, I'm not going to argue with you.
Mm-hmm. But it is one of these things where you said you have to have a desire to change.
Yes.
And a deep desire to do the work it takes to change.
Yeah.
So as you're going through this, and you look at yourself, and you go back to the beginning, what do you think was the one thing that made the most difference for you? There's a lot of different things I'm sure you're teaching your Audacity method, but what really hit home with you that you go, that's really kicked it off for me?
Good question. The biggest thing of all, and I mentioned when I was telling the story, sort of looking in the mirror and realizing that it was the guy in the mirror that, was responsible for this. The biggest thing for me was the decision to take 100% responsibility for absolutely everything that had and will ever happen to me. And this is really critical, because as long as I say, well, it's my boss, it's the government, it's the local politicians, it's my employees, whatever it is, as long as I say that, then I am completely powerless to make the changes. Now, it may very well be that something external happened. I mean, gosh, COVID came along.
Yeah.
I didn't do it. It wasn't me. But there it was. But as long as we continue to point the finger and say, that's why I'm suffering, then until that thing decides to change, you're going to continue to suffer. But as soon as I say, even in the face of that thing and this thing and every other thing, I am going to work with what I've got, and I'm going to take responsibility for the outcomes, then now you've got the power, and you get to decide what you want to do. So that was the single biggest decision that I made that launched everything else. No, this one's on me, and I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, when you read, the thing that comes to mind, and I don't even know why, when you think about some of the people that were in concentration camps and the horrible things, the atrocities they endured, but they're mental, that they chose not to be a part of it. I just think that is one of the best examples of that.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a famous book written by a fellow named Viktor Frankl, who was an Austrian psychologist prior to the war, and he was Jewish. And like so many, he ended up in a concentration camp. And he decided, and this is the choice that we make, he decided to make the most of it and decided to treat it as a study. And he watched and observed and realized that the people who were there, who nonetheless had some larger purpose in life, something that they were intending to do, were the ones that tended to survive, and the ones that did not were the ones that tended to perish. And he wrote a famous book, and it's called Man's Search for Meaning, and that came out of his experience in the concentration camps. But it's interesting that you bring that up, because that's exactly right. And that is actually one of, because we have these 3 steps. The first step is the pattern interrupt. The second step is what we call release and reset, where the people I work with actually get to experience, even for a short period of time, what it feels like to be completely fearless and worry-free and anxiety-free. And that's pretty addicting. Yeah. And then the third part is where we lock it in. And in that third part, we introduce some replacement habits. replacement mental habits to replace the anxiety habit. And one of the three is what we call replace it with purpose. And what that says is, and I believe very strongly, that every single one of us was put here on this planet for a reason. And, if you look at some of the well-known, you look at the Mother Teresas of the world and the Nelson Mandelas and the Steve Jobs of the world, they had big purpose. I've got purpose right now. Everybody has a purpose. Some of them are, big. Some of us are small. Somebody's purpose might be to be the best damn gardener that has ever been, and to make a flower garden that just brings joy to people. Well, that's an amazing purpose. And when you have that, and you wake up in the morning saying, this is why I'm breathing today in order to accomplish this, then the little obstacles that come along to get in your way are nothing other than inconveniences that I will find a way around.
Yeah.
They are not game stoppers. But when we lack purpose, or when we've taken we've forgotten about it, or we've never embraced it, then we don't have that incredible horsepower, that drive that gives us the strength to go through the obstacles that invariably get thrown in front of us. But when you've got a reason for getting up, Nelson Mandela, this guy was in prison for 27 years.
Yeah.
What can possibly carry a person through that, except we saw after he got out, okay, this is what I'm here for. And incredible, earth-changing changes that came about.
Yeah. It's so incredible. And I like how I like your 3-step process, because, you're stepping back, you're taking a look at it, you're releasing, you're just experiencing what your life would be like without the fear and anxiety and imposter syndrome, self-doubt. And then I think you talk about locking it in and replacing the habits.
That's right.
I think a lot of people, we can read, we can do the things and even sometimes feel what it's like without it. But if you can't replace those habits, the old ones just keep working in the background.
That's exactly right. Any habit you can get rid of it, but only by replacing it with a different habit. Nature abhors a void. We've heard that before. And so that old habit will come in. Unless you fill that void with something else, then that old one's just going to keep coming right back again. And because it's been, because that's the mental groove that you've worn in your neural networks. That's the easiest one to fall into.
Yes.
So it takes some practice.
Yeah, it is. So I can't believe it, but we're already getting close to time here.
Oh, wow.
But it's awesome to get to talk to you today, David. So tell me a little bit about your program, your
sure.
and the 13-week program, some of the other things you're doing there at iFearless. So I don't want to leave without talking about that. Oh,
well, I appreciate that. Yeah, iFearless, and it's i-fearless.com. Its mission is to help people conquer anxiety, self-doubt, and imposter syndrome. That's what we're here for. Now, I see that as like opening a door for people, because once that door is open, once those obstacles are removed, wow. It's like, remember, I don't know if you saw the Kentucky Derby a couple of weeks ago, but that horse just went, opened the gate and wow, away he goes. He's saying, I'm out of here.
I'm winning.
And so that's our purpose, is to remove these invisible obstacles, and from individuals and from teams. Because there are teams in workplaces, in companies that work together. Now, here's one of the interesting things. Statistically, as much as 85% of the adult population experiences self-doubt and imposter syndrome. I think it's like 75% for self-doubt and 85% for imposter syndrome. So look around you. Either when you're sitting in your car, look around you, find 10 people, 8 of them are experiencing it, or at work, the people that you're working with on your team. Now, that's kind of like dragging an anchor. I call it carrying a 100-pound sack of rocks on your back. How can you possibly perform at the highest level when you are being slowed down, obstructed, dragged by this load that you're pulling behind you. And so what iFearless does is work with you either as an individual or with a team and your team members, small teams, and identify where these things are, and then get rid of them. And then you're free to say, okay, let's go. So that's what iFearless does. We have, I mentioned the Audacity method course for that works with individuals. We also have a course called Unleash Your Audacious Team. And that works small teams, up to 10 people that we work with. We have another program that I work at. It's an in-person thing for helping people who are afraid of public speaking, because that's a really common one as well. Remove those fears and doubts. But that's what we do. I work through those courses. I also work one-on-one with coaching with individuals. The Audacity method course, as I said, is 13 weeks. It's a hybrid. Some of it's online with exercises and videos and exercises that you do, but at the key points along the way, it's one-on-one with me to do personal coaching. And you mentioned a couple of books that I've got, and they're available on the website as well. There was the Unsubscribe from Anxiety, which was the first one I wrote, and then, there we go, thank you. And then The Fearless Decision. And so those are available on Amazon. And as I say, I mean, here's the funny one. I turned 68 this coming weekend. All right. And when I turned 65 3 years ago, I said, I know what I want to be when I grow up. I finally figured it out. And so this is my mission, and I'm gearing up for my next 40-year career. And I'm having an absolute blast. Retirement? What the heck is that? I'm sorry, I don't know what y'all's talking about. So
that's awesome.
But so that's what iFearless is about, and I'm available to help to help with those resources.
Nice. Well, David, so if someone wants to reach out to you, LinkedIn's a good place to get you. I-fearless.com.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. My personal email is david@i-fearless.com, and I open them myself. I don't get stuff filtered. And if somebody reaches out to me, I will reach back.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you for being here today, David. Again, we have David Stone here from iFearless. We're talking about conquering self-doubt, imposter syndrome, anxiety, and listen to your inspiration. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure, Damon. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share this with your viewers and your listeners.
Oh, we're very welcome. You're very welcome. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for stopping by and listening. Ronald, Chris, and everyone else that's listening. Thanks for being here. We will be back again next week with another show.